All right, we're going to switch gears a little bit here. We have Dr. Stephen Lake, who's going to be joining us shortly. And let me share a little bit about him and I'll bring him right on. So, Stephen has spent the last 20 years working as a psychotherapist, focusing on men who have suffered sexual abuse and couples that are going through high conflict divorce. He's been a writer and an editor for the marriage section of the Good Men Project. And his last book, Talk to Me, was written for men on how to improve their intimate relationships. So I'm going to bring on Dr. Stephen Lake, and we are going to be talking about the sensitive man, the pros and cons. Hi, Stephen, how's it going?
Hi, good. Can you hear me?
I can hear you great. I was telling my husband, I was preparing for this for today, and he saw my list and he goes, "Oh, the sensitive man." He's like, "That's for me." And I said, "Yeah." He's like, oh, and he actually said to me, he goes, "Sometimes being a sensitive man isn't so great." I'm like, "Well, that's why we're talking about the pros and cons." So this is really perfect. And thank you so much for joining us this morning, Stephen.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I just caught the last section with Allison, who is actually a co-worker of mine too. So
yes,
it's wonderful to hear her speak.
Yes, and it's a great segue, talking about, the family dynamic with kids and divorce, and now we're sort of moving into the man himself. So I'm really curious, it sounds like you're, done a lot of work, have a lot of experience in different areas, and I'm really curious about this topic. When I said to you, "What do you want to talk about?" and you said, "I want to talk about the sensitive man." So I'm curious, like, what led you to want to talk about this, and why is it so important to you?
Well, I guess because I consider myself a sensitive man, and so I have the conflicts that concept brings to me and has brought to me in my life. So I was brought up with two very, very different presentations of humanity, if you will. So I had my mother, my father. My father was the traditional, classic, stereotypic man, right? So he was a Canadian light heavyweight champion. So he was like 6 foot, 220 pounds, really good looking and powerful, physically powerful. And he was a military sergeant. So that's what I was brought up with, this ideal, in those days, masculine sense of power, dominance, and ability. On the other hand, my mother was a former actress, and she was emotional, she was sensitive, she was caring, she was nurturing, all those traditional feminine traits, though she did work as well. And my father worked in the military. So I had these two very different perceptions of people and genders. But I was, I think, much to my father's disappointment at the time, I was a sickly child. One, I was sickly. And so I was physically very weak. I had asthma, and I became an observer. And I spent a lot of time with my mother. She was obviously looking after me, and my father was away on courses a lot. So I spent a lot of time with my mother. So she became a very big influence. And that was through her that I sort of learned to listen and communicate with women. So those are the two opposing forces that I was brought up with. Do you have any thoughts, or anything you want to say?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I
could
think,
talk a lot.
oh, this is your 30 minutes. So yeah, let's talk about that. One of the things that really, my vision for the summit and sort of the reasoning behind it is I was just starting to see kind of what you're speaking to is that transition, right? That transition to a more, self-aware man who is, really looking to make that shift, and I think that's part of the reason why, or the issues that we're having in marriages is that we're trying to find our place. And growing up, like you said, a lot of families are, the dad is supposed to be the tough one, and not to show feeling, and he
Mhm.
was the kind of the breadwinner, and then mom was the soft nurturing one.
Mhm.
And now I think we're, as a society, we're starting to make that shift. And as much as I believe that men want to embrace that, it's so hardwired in them, even since, the caveman days, that they're not allowed to be that way. And being such that is a bad thing. And, again, going back to my husband, he's been dealing with some stuff, and he almost like blames himself for being sensitive. It's almost like a bad thing. He's like, I'm sorry that I was emotional. I'm sorry that
Mhm.
and it's like, there's nothing to be sorry about.
Right, right.
And so that's why, when I saw this topic, I thought, this is such a great opportunity for us to share with men that there's nothing that there's nothing wrong with being sensitive. And then there's actually a lot of benefits. Like, I know having a highly emotional, intelligent husband is like the lottery,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And yet, and yet we kind of poo-poo on that.
yeah. So we have mixed messages.
Yeah.
The old traditional cultural stereotypes, which are still prevalent to a certain
Mm-hmm.
degree, I think they're changing. I see
Mm-hmm.
a big difference with young people, millennials in
Yes.
particular, much
Yes.
more fluidity around sexuality and gender and all that stuff. Uh, and you're fighting a couple things. One is, you said, sort of biology. So there's this testosterone that men have, which gives us a certain sort of energy and drive, right? So you've got that. Then you have cultural messaging, and that's changed. So in my practice right now, I see the flip. I have a lot of corporate women, for example, who are clients, and their husbands come in who maybe have had a job and have maybe retired, become the house husband, for example. And so there's a real flip. And the problems they come in with are the same problems they came in before, when it was a traditional setup of the man, right? So the woman is not communicating, she's not being very sensitive, right? And she's giving him grief for giving him grief for the house is not as together as it should be. you know,
Or she would like it to be, or how she would have done it.
that's right. There's a total flip, right? I'm going, oh, this is interesting,
Yeah.
and I sometimes I wrote a book. I think you mentioned the book, Talk to Me, How to Communicate with Women. But often I have the women read it because the gender roles have flipped so dramatically that it's
Yeah.
relevant to them now.
Yeah.
Basic communication skills are good for men and women. They're the same. I have this one line that, men know how to communicate just fine, because often you hear that. I get a lot of female clients who come in and say, well, my man doesn't know how to communicate. And I say, oh, no, he knows how to communicate just fine with other men. And
Mm-hmm.
women know how to communicate fine with other women. It's when the two
Mm-hmm.
get together that we cross, paths going the opposite directions.
Yeah.
So the sensitive man it's still not appreciated or valued. And the reason it's not appreciated or valued is because there are still the messaging out there: sensitivity equals vulnerability. And from a man's perspective, that equals weakness,
Yes.
one, and femininity. And
Mm-hmm.
most men don't want to be equated with the feminine.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's a misunderstanding around that, because we all have feminine and masculine qualities, right?
Exactly, exactly. So, I mean, I even heard that one of my clients came in, she was talking about her children. She was aghast because she heard, this is a 7-year-old boy, and they were on the playground and somebody was acting a certain way, and someone said, oh, that's so gay. It's like, oh my God, it's still going on. So
Mm.
at the playground, kids are modifying other children's behavior by statements like that. In other words, don't be essentially feminine. So that's really, even today, that's happening on the playground. And I was like, I mean, at one level, I know that goes on, but another level, it's kind of, I'm aghast. It's
Mm-hmm.
2020, and that's still happening.
Yeah.
And we still see that, with homophobia, with hate crimes against gay men in this case, and stuff like that. We're not as open to differences as sometimes we hope, or at least I hope, that we as a society could and should be.
And I'm clear that it's not our fault. It's not men's fault. It's just, part of it I think is the wiring just from, our DNA or their DNA, and as well as kind of like where we're brought up, what environment we were brought up in. I can always see if I think about my ex or my previous relationships and looking at their parents and then looking at them, it always makes sense. There's always a correlation that I see there. So I'm curious from you, what are some of the, we've talked about a little bit here, but what are some other challenges that you see in sensitive men embracing their sensitivity, and how can they take positive action and start to really work and nurture that versus trying to make it wrong and resist it and being like, I shouldn't be this way, right? All the shoulds, right?
Yeah. Well, I think you have to become strong in who you are. You have to say, I'm okay being this way.
Yeah.
And that's a personal growth issue, right? And not to sort of hide and act, what's considered appropriate. So, for example, I told you about my father, right? So when I was, 18, 19, I guess, I went to theater school to become an actor. Well, that upset him so much. He didn't talk to me for a year. It's like,
really?
oh my God, my son's going to be an actor. In other words, which means, does that mean he's gay? Right.
Yes.
So he just didn't know how to deal with that. Right.
Yes.
But I knew I had to do that from my own personal self-exploration. I wanted to understand my emotions more because I had emotions.
Yeah.
And it's not like guys don't have emotions, right? Guys have as many emotions as women. We're just taught how to tamp them down, cut off from them, not give them value.
Yeah, numb it out.
That's right. So anger, not so much, because you can use anger can be very motivating and give you energy, et cetera, et cetera. And so we see that in sports where we have activities which are, it's like the old combat days basically, but it's more organized and civilized, right? So we have football, for example, and hockey, which are quite intense, and often you see tempers getting frayed in those sports, but that's considered okay. So
I was actually watching a UFC fight last night, and I was watching. There was 2 fights that were women.
Yes.
And there's a part of me that was like, admired them, but a part of me felt like, this is so weird, like watching 2 chicks punch each other in the face and knee each other and be on time. Like it was really bizarre. But it's just like, I see also with women, you were referring to it earlier, how we're really, I believe what I'm noticing is like really embracing that masculine side, which, and moments are great, but at the same time, it concerns me.
Well, yeah. And to that point, I've dealt with a number of women who were lawyers. I don't know why, but in that particular profession, and they gave it up. And the reason they gave it up was because they said they had to be too masculine. In other words, they had to work the insane amount of hours that lawyers work. And just the whole competitive atmosphere, and it's a win-lose situation, right? The win and you lose. And they didn't like it. And so they actually gave up their professions. And that's pretty dramatic. Likewise, I know a number of men who studied to become doctors and gave that up. And one in particular who gave it up before he even started practicing. He graduated in medicine, and he became a very famous director in the Canadian theater.
Oh.
Yes. And that was Jean Gascon, who's now deceased. He was at Stratford for a long time. And so if you are willing to stand up for who you are, and that takes great courage. We see that with, say, with gay men and in the whole queer community, and that of them standing up and giving voice to their needs and their concerns and their right to be treated as individuals. Like, why do people get so upset that you want to have sex with somebody who's not the same or is the same gender as you? I mean, I don't even understand that. It's like, are we so bored that we have to focus on that? For the rest of us, it's like, who cares?
Yeah.
But boy, a lot of people do care. And that goes to, our religious upbringing, essentially. And then there's cultural difference as well. So I have a lot of Filipino friends, and the culture there I see is way more flexible and more open to gender issues and differences. It's very different.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's a wonderful thing about, say, living in Vancouver, where we're so multicultural and we're getting those influences, and then so we can broaden our experiences and experiences of others and become more accepting. So that's the first step, I would say, for a sensitive man, is to accept themselves and then explore. Yeah, and then explore. It's like, well, what does it mean to be sensitive? Because I have a lot of men, say between 35 and 45, who are confused about relationships with women, because it's like they present as sensitive men, and then all of a sudden they're meeting women, and once they start getting in a relationship, the women at first say they like sensitive guys, right? The new age man, etc. But once they get going, the women don't like that. They want a strong guy. They want to see a guy crying all the time and being sensitive and emotional and all that stuff. So then they get this reverse messaging. No, I don't like that. Well, I thought you wanted a sensitive guy, but no, so they get confused.
Yes. And I'm so glad you pointed that out, Stephen, because I feel like that's part of why I created the summit, because it is confusing. I mean, I'm not even a man and I'm confused. So never mind you guys. And I'm just, and I'm seeing the shift, and I'm seeing people really resisting embracing their own authenticity, whatever that is. So I'm so glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, that authenticity. And then when it comes to sexuality, for example, and I think you may even have some speakers about this on this topic, we kind of need that polar opposite energy to create heat.
Yeah.
Right? Because if we're exactly the same, we might be good friends. We might be loving and caring and gentle and develop deep friendship. But if you want some heat in a relationship, those differences create that friction.
Yeah.
Or whatever that is. So I might be more passive, you might be more aggressive, and that can work really well. Or it could flip. And in truth, over time, often that goes back and forth between couples, for example, whatever the gender you are. So I think that's something else to be considered as well. And that's what makes it confusing, is that sense of, okay, I'm in my sensitivity, and yet that doesn't turn on my partner. All right. And I'll give you a personal story with with my partner the last 22 years. It's like, and she's a feminist, old-time feminist, okay? We're in our mid-60s, right? So she's old-time feminist, and she's never been married. We've been together for 22 years. She's not really interested in marriage. And so I was being sensitive, and then she went, I need you to be a man.
I am a man.
I'm like, what do you mean? And she wanted that physical strength, if you will, and that physical energy of that traditional masculine energy, but not like everywhere, but definitely in our contact and around our sexual energy. She needed that. And one could even say that would be a normal expression of our biologies, of our genetic heritage, right? In other areas, she wants me to be, just who I am, whatever I am. But in that area, she's really clear. And at one time, I was, talking about, the masculinity and stuff like that. This is when I first started getting into it, maybe, I don't know, 15 years ago or something like that. And she said to me, Stephen, because I was talking about my clients and they're really confused about their masculinity. She said, Stephen, just tell them if they're really confused, just bend over and look between their legs.
What? Sorry, say that. I missed something. Say that again.
She said, if they're ever confused about their masculinity, Tell them
Oh,
to bend over and look between their legs. And I went, okay.
yeah.
So, and that's coming from a woman. So
Yeah.
I thought that was amusing, but there was a sense of that. It's like if we could not be so worried about our masculinity and just be who we are, all
Yeah.
of who we are, which as you
Yeah.
said earlier, it's like we all have masculine and feminine elements within us, right? And
Yeah.
so it's really about being in tune with who you are at any given moment. So
Mhm.
sometimes I feel very strong. I was in court just the other day, and the lawyer said something to me, and I shot something right back at him. And I went, "Oh, where did that come from?" And that's just, that masculine energy thing. And in other times, like when I'm with my clients, I'm very soft and I'm open and I'm considerate, and I'm very much, I'd say, more in what's traditionally interpreted as a feminine energy.
Mhm.
And if you're not afraid of that, then that expands who you are.
Mhm. Mhm. I heard two things in your speaking in the last 2 minutes. I heard, when you were saying about the sensitive man, what I'm hearing is that perhaps it's the labeling, right? The definitions we're putting in. We're like it either fits in box A, B, or C, or D. It's like, and what I'm hearing is like that's where the limitations are, is when we're trying to define what it means, when really it's just, this is just who I am. I'm Janelle, and this is
Yeah.
this is how I am. It's not like I'm good or bad,
Mm-hmm.
or fat or skinny. I am who I am. And
Mm-hmm.
if I can just peel away those labels, that gives me the freedom to weave in and out of being sensitive, being female, being masculine, like all of that, and not making any of that in
Wrong.
the good or bad categories.
Exactly.
And then the other thing I heard is when you were sharing about being, you stepping into your feminine energy once in a while, and sometimes you're in your masculine, is that I think as a woman, I think why we love that feminine energy from a man, which I think a lot of men feel like, well, it shouldn't be. But you know what? That's actually what we love, that because in that's the space where we can truly connect on a deeper level. We can't do
Mm.
that from the masculine energy. So, I just want to share, and I think this is kind of what you were alluding to, Stephen, is that it's healthy to be able to weave in and out of your feminine and masculine energy, and whatever it is that
Mm-hmm.
you're comfortable with and that feels true to you and authentic to you is what you should embrace. And we love that. And we also love, like you said, a masculine man at certain times. Like I'm 4'10" and a half. I love tall men. I don't know why. To me, that's like masculine. I would date someone that was 5'8", and I was just like, this is just weird. You know, I like hairy men. I don't like men that have no body hair. It makes, but that's just a preference. It's not anything on my partner. It's just my own thing. And so I think a lot on my other note is that don't try to change who you are for somebody else. Like if
Mm-hmm.
that person truly loves you, they're going to love you for who you are. And if it's that big of a problem, these other things, well, then maybe that's not the right fit. I don't know. That's
Mm-hmm.
my 2 cents about it
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. So there's lots going on, and getting back to the idea that the sensitive man, I mean, it's really that changing those, as you say, those labels, dropping those labels, I think is definitely the way to go. And I see that again with younger people where there's that much more fluidity. I think they're fighting against those labels. It's like some people don't even want to be identified. No, I'm not going to tell you which way I'm going. It's like, this is who I am, and you will see.
Yeah.
We'll
It's
see
like
how I,
that. It's like
yeah.
those labels of that, I don't know if you've been noticing. I noticed it when I was in the States. I don't see it as much here in Canada, but in the States, when I went to a conference, they had like name badges, and you had to choose if you were a he or him, a she or her, a
Oh,
they. And I'd never seen that before. And I was like, what's a
okay.
they?
Well, yeah. Well, that's personal pronouns, and
Yeah.
that's with in particular with transgender, for example.
Yeah. But the labeling of it, I was just
Yeah,
like, oh, this is really interesting.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Putting labels. We're going to see more of that.
mm,
Or in other words, how people prefer to be addressed.
mm.
So, and of course, that gets more confusing.
Doesn't it? I know. I was like, what's a they?
Yeah.
How do I refer? You know,
That's
how do I
right.
refer to them?
That's right. So, and I think, people generally speaking don't like that complexity. People like to simplify things. So, are you straight or not?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what if you're in between? Or what if you go both ways? Or what if, well, I was straight this period and now I'm not? And then people get very antsy with that,
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
again, I think it's because we're not looking to what's really important, which
Yeah.
is, who are you? Hi, Janelle. I'm Stephen. And out of our engagement, we discover the richness of who each other is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's so great, Steve. This time has gone by so fast. I'm looking at the time. I'm like, holy crap, we're almost done. So, the last 2 minutes, can you just, what is sort of your lasting message? If there's anything you want to leave for people, what would you love to share with them in these last few minutes?
Trust your feelings, trust your intuition.
Mm,
Know that those feelings are coming from a valid place. See feelings as information, and find people who accept you as you are, however you
mm,
display yourself. Uh, yeah, find groups, find friends, find acceptance, and most importantly, find acceptance within yourself and see this as a springboard into discovering more aspects of yourself.
amazing. Really great advice, Stephen. Thank you so much for being with me today and us. Do you have something that you can share with our viewers that would really help with this distinction?
Uh, yes, they can talk to me personally. So I'm offering free half-hour consults. So they can contact me, email me would probably
Okay.
be the best, which would be dr.steve@sasktel.net. That's dr.
Sasktel.
Yeah. Long story.
Okay. Got it. Awesome. So I will include your email in the follow-up email that's going to be going out tonight.
Great.
And so that anyone that wants to speak with you or has any questions around this can contact you directly.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I so appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you, Janelle. It was lots of fun, and it was life enhancing.
Amazing. I love it. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your Sunday.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye.
All right, guys. So that was Dr. Stephen Lake. Amazing conversation. I love that. I think that's such an important topic, and I think a lot of viewers are going to got a lot out of that. So